now to President Trump's address to the nation last night on the war with Iran. He talked about military plans, repeating his statements that the U.S.'s objectives are nearly met without offering any new information about those objectives. He also warned if Iran does not strike a deal, the U.S. military will target its oil industry. That threat comes amid growing concerns about the spike in U.S. gas prices as oil tankers have been blocked from traveling through the Strait of Hormuz.
When this conflict is over, the strait will open up naturally. It'll just open up naturally. They're going to want to be able to sell oil because that's all they have to try and rebuild. It will resume the flowing, and the gas prices will rapidly come back down. Stock prices will rapidly go back up.
Joining us now for some analysis is Hurd, a political science professor and international relations expert at Northwestern University. Professor, thanks so much for joining me this morning. I know President Trump told the nation the war with Iran is, quote, nearing completion and will last another 2 to 3 weeks. Do you believe that?
Well, it's hard to know what to believe here. My main reaction to last night was that he seemed very confused, Trump did, about what he's doing and why. I don't understand what the goal is. It's not clear that he understands the goal or that he has a goal. So overall, it just seems kind of like a quagmire where the actions of the military aren't really matching any political objectives. And so I was left very confused about what the Americans are trying to accomplish.
Now, we know more U.S. troops are headed to the region right now, and just yesterday, 6,000 sailors were deployed. Yet the president made no mention of boots on the ground in Iran. What are your thoughts on that omission, and is it significant?
Well, I think for decades, the American governments have been trying to find a way to deal with the Iranian government through various kinds of threats and inducements and friendliness and antagonism. But none of them were foolish enough to attack the country. Now that the U.S. has done that, it's created a much bigger problem that we're all paying the price for, with higher gas prices, higher heating costs and everything. So I think the clear way out of this is for the Americans to stop attacking Iran rather than to attack more intensively, because the Iranian government wants to sell its oil. That's all that its economy is based on. So it's been trying for years to sell its oil into the international markets to get revenue. If the Americans were to back off, I think that you'd find that the Iranian government would be quite happy to resume oil flows, prices would come down. And that seems like a much smarter choice than getting the Americans even more involved in managing the Iranian society and government.
But should he have mentioned any plans for boots on the ground at all, in your opinion, to the American people, many of whom, of course, have loved ones who are serving in the military?
Of course, for sure. It's quite unfair to all those people to leave them in limbo like this. I think what the American government needs to do is articulate any plan, like to show that it's got a plan, anything, what are its goals. It's not at all clear what the Americans are trying to accomplish by this, except bombing more stuff, destroying more stuff. So articulating how the military tools fit into a political objective seems absolutely crucial. It seems so obvious that that's what should have happened from the very beginning. And we still don't have that. And it's been, what, 6 weeks now? And we're not getting any clearer sense of what the Americans are trying to do. You know, 6 weeks of aerial bombardment has never improved anywhere, as far as I know, in world history. So continuing down that path isn't going to make the situation in Iran any better for anyone.
And finally, and for time purposes, quickly, the president also made no mentions of negotiations with Iran, while stating on social media before that speech that Iran requested a ceasefire. Democrats have accused the president of lying outright. Should he have elaborated on the state of any talks, and do you think any are actually occurring?
I'm sure things are going on and people are talking, no doubt. But I don't trust Donald Trump to tell us the truth about those things. But I would imagine that there's no way that there aren't conversations going. But there's a pretty easy way here to go forward, right? If the Americans and the Israelis stopped attacking Iran, then the Iranian government would probably be quite happy to resume oil flows and the prices of fuel would come down. At some point, that's the only way forward. So the question is, I guess, how much more threatening does Trump want to be in the next few weeks before we get to that, obvious resolution?
All right, Northwestern political science professor Hurd, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us this morning.